we're born into a world, at least I was born into a world where artificial lighting is everywhere and it's just part of life, but then you don't realize how it's negatively impacting you.
I love this word that you use in your marketing, mal-illuminated, right?
So the mitochondria in your cells are producing more energy for your cells and your cells function better. So we see all benefits in all different parts of the body.
Have you seen any studies that are directly proving the benefits of red light on sleep?
The number one most common piece of feedback that we get from our customers is they use the light and they notice that they're sleeping better. And then on the fertility side, it's really fascinating to me, but it was in women and they shine the light on the back of their head and they saw improvements.
They saw improvements in hormone health?
And fertility.
Fertility,
Yeah,
wow. From your perspective, what are some of the biggest misconceptions and concerns around vitamin D?
I think the biggest is that thinking that you can take a pill.
We are conducting a really bad experiment on human health between the food, between the lack of diet and exercise, and then the lack of quality light.
Both supplement companies, but
yeah.
My company is primarily focused on supplementing with safe, healthy amount of red and near-infrared light because everyone is massively deficient.
Hey, I am here today in Scottsdale, Arizona. It's a beautiful day. I'm going to pick up the founder and CEO of Mito Red Light, Scott Chaverri. We're going to talk about the benefits of red light, health, wellness, where our country is at, and more. I think you guys are going to love this and learn a lot from Scott. Here we go. Now let's see if he can open the door, which is always the fun part of these interviews. Push the button. Push. There we go. There we go.
This is
hey, Scott.
Too technologically advanced for me.
Thanks for doing this.
Thank you.
The funny thing about that is now every single podcast guest, without fail, we've had that same issue. Welcome to the Cybertruck here. We're just gonna cruise around for a little while and enjoy the perfect weather in Arizona. You choose to live in Scottsdale because of the sunshine?
Absolutely. Actually, it's a funny story. I lived in upstate New York in Rochester on and off for 10 years. And my wife and I got married in 2009. After about 4 years in Rochester, she told me she had enough of the winters.
Yeah,
and,
I would probably say the same.
Being kind of a numbers guy and a finance guy at heart, I did an analysis of cost of living and hours of sunshine or days of sunshine per year. And I narrowed my search down to Phoenix, Charlotte, and Tampa.
Nice.
And I wound up landing a job in Phoenix with Amazon. So we moved in 2013.
When did the awareness or just, I guess, passion come in for light therapy?
Well, I've always been interested in health and wellness. And, I had unsatisfactory run-ins with the orthodox medical system. Mm-hmm. Yeah, even as a teenager. Mm-hmm. So this goes back to when I had really bad acne as a teenager. And I would go to a dermatologist and they would tell me that diet had nothing to do with it. And, they would give me creams to put on my face, but nothing worked. And so from a very early age, I had kind of distrust of the system. So I would look for alternative solutions. And then in my 20s, I had very bad insomnia. I lived on the alcohol and caffeine seesaw, like a lot of people do.
Yep.
Caffeine to get through the day and alcohol to fall asleep.
Yep.
And I stumbled upon, I learned about the importance of kind of the circadian rhythm and avoiding certain wavelengths of light after sunset. And it was just absolutely amazing to me that getting a pair of blue blocking glasses essentially solved my insomnia problem. Cost me about $10 after struggling with insomnia for years. And so that experience just led me to do a deep dive on light in general, right? Because it was one of those things where in retrospect it's so obvious. Just we're born into a world, at least I was born into a world where artificial lighting is everywhere and it's just part of life, but then you don't realize how it's negatively impacting you in some ways. I wound up buying a red light device in 2017 and using it, and I noticed that I was just sleeping so much better.
Cool.
So I said, I wonder if I can build devices that give you the light you want, that that are just more reasonably priced. And it turns out that I could.
Yeah.
And that was really the genesis of the company in mid 2018.
So it's 2018. So, but really the catalyst was your own, which is common. This is the same way that I really got involved in what I'm doing, but it's the catalyst was your own experience, and then blue light glasses was kind of like oh wow, there's a whole host of issues that are going on here that we need to solve.
That's right. I was just very unhealthy. You just have to make a decision that you're going to make better decisions day in and day out. And then when you start doing that, you go down the rabbit hole of diet, exercise, sleep, mindset, and then environment in general.
Right.
And I actually think that of all the things I mentioned, that light is underappreciated in terms of the actual benefits and costs that the light that you're exposed to can have on your health. And so if there's one thing that I can help move the needle on, I want to get people thinking more about light.
Yeah.
We're just spending 93% of our time indoors.
Yeah.
And we're not out in the sun, and that's having a lot of downstream cascading negative effects, in my opinion.
I love this word that you use in your marketing, mal-illuminated, right? So maybe explain a little bit how you guys think about that. And it does seem like over the last 100 or so years, particularly, but it's really sped up, we are conducting a really bad experiment on human health, between the food, between the lack of diet and exercise, and then the lack of quality light.
It's a huge problem, and it has it's really a perfect storm of different factors. I mean, the primary one is the Industrial Revolution, and our ancestors 150 years ago and before were essentially outside all day long. When you think about the solar spectrum, 9% of the energy is ultraviolet light, 39% is visible light, so it's the rainbow, Roy G. Biv, and 54% is actually infrared. So more than half of the energy is infrared. And so our ancestors would be outside all day long bathing in infrared light. And now we're inside all day and we're massively deficient
Right.
in infrared. So one of the things I say is, you mentioned earlier that we're both supplement companies, but
Yeah.
my company is primarily focused on supplementing with safe, healthy amount of red and near infrared light, because everyone is massively deficient. I mean, the good news is that, we have technologies and things that we can do to help mitigate some of the problems.
Yeah.
So, our devices emit a high amount of red and near infrared light between 600 to 900 nanometers. It's the safest part of the solar spectrum because it's longer wavelength, lower energy light, whereas, ultraviolet and even blue light is shorter wavelength, higher energy.
Mm-hmm.
But it's non-thermal, so when you get into infrared, that's where you have thermal light. That's an infrared sauna. Those wavelengths of light get absorbed by water and create heat in the body. So we have this longer wavelength light, low energy light, but non-thermal, so literally the safest window of the solar spectrum. And you can use these devices for 8 to 12 minutes a day, and you're supplementing a good amount of the light that we normally would be getting if we were living a more ancestral lifestyle.
One of the reasons I think we've gotten here, and as far as how poor human health is in America, is because so many of these things we're talking about are sort of out of sight, out of mind, right? So you cannot see your gut microbiome. It's microscopic, yet it plays a role in everything throughout the day. You cannot see the cells and how they're energized and the health of the cell when it has this infrared light, this red light. So maybe talk about just what happens that we can't see. How does this impact cellular health? And then get into as much as you want around how that makes a difference around things like inflammation, which of course is the big buzzword of the day. How does the panel work, and talk about how it impacts the cell itself and cellular health?
There's a couple mechanisms of actions, what's going on at the biochemical level. So these long wavelengths of light, they're able to penetrate deeper into the body, and they act on the mitochondria, hence the name of the company, red light, short for mitochondria. And essentially, there's a chromophore, which is just a fancy word for a light-absorbing molecule, that's inside the mitochondria called cytochrome C oxidase. And so what we think happens, and this is still technically a theory, but this is the consensus at the moment, is that the wavelengths of light go into the mitochondria, and when they are absorbed by cytochrome C oxidase that's bound with nitric oxide, it literally vibrates them apart. So now you have free-floating cytochrome C oxidase that can shake hands with oxygen, which is needed to make ATP. It's the final step of ATP production, or cellular energy production. When they study this, they observe higher ATP, and they also observe higher nitric oxide. So this is why it's believed that the light goes in, vibrates nitric oxide and cytochrome C apart. More cytochrome C is available to bind with the oxygen to make energy. And then why does that matter? Well, to the extent that your cells are producing more, or the mitochondria in your cells are producing more energy for your cells, then your cells function better.
Right.
And it's really that simple. And the bottom line is that pretty much every cell in your body, other than red blood cells, have mitochondria. So we see benefits in all different parts of the body, really, whether it's hair follicles, which is one of the original ways or observations that was done back in the 50s, skin health, brain health. We see a lot of really promising research on infrared light in the brain. Brain cells have a lot of mitochondria.
Yep.
Performance, muscles.
And a little bit can go a long way, right, Scott? Maybe 20, 30 minutes a day. Is that right?
Generally for kind of regular maintenance, if you will,
Yeah.
10 minutes a day, 4 to 6 times a week.
Wow.
It's actually, some of the studies are pretty amazing where there was one study that comes to mind. It was a TBI study. They applied red light to the head, red and near infrared light to the head, and the subjects were war veterans. So they were studying traumatic brain injury 3 times a week, 10 minutes for 6 weeks. And they saw massive improvements in not just the TBI symptoms, but also, curiously enough, the PTSD.
Yeah.
It's super amazing to me, actually, that, 3 times a week for 6 weeks, and they're seeing, benefits across all these measurements. So you don't need that much, I don't think. But personally, I use the light 6 times a week. Sometimes only 8 minutes, and sometimes I'll do 15. It really depends on just what I feel like that day. I've been using them for so long.
Are you using the full bed?
In the office, I use the bed, and then I have a nice kind of what I call a sandwich setup at my house with a
2 panels.
full body, 2 full body panels, front and back.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. Over the years, I've noticed that I crave it more in the summer.
Interesting. Even living in Arizona, is that because you're not spending as much time outside?
Yeah, I think so. I think, it's 120 degrees, and so I'm never outside in July and August. And then I wound up using the lights a lot more.
Have you seen any studies that are directly proving the benefits of red light on sleep?
I have, actually, and it is the number one most common piece of feedback that we get from our customers is they use the light and they notice that they're sleeping better.
Wow.
So we have an app. So the customers that use the app to control the device, usually we'll ask them survey questions the next day, and one of them is, how'd you sleep last night? Generally speaking, so we do it on a good, better, best scale. So no difference, better than usual, much better than usual. And 25% of the time, they say much better than usual.
That's great.
And about 30% of the time, they say better than usual. So it's a 50% you're not noticing, but this isn't an acute thing, though. Like, they're literally using it once, and we're asking the next day to just sleep better than you normally do. There is one study that we quote on our blog, because we have a long article on red light and sleep. They did it on, I love this study, they did it on 30 elite female Chinese basketball players. Okay? So it was in China, and they did full body, front of the body, 30 minutes of red light, I think it was in early evening. And they did subjective sleep quality scores, and they noticed that, there were much higher scores on subjective sleep quality.
Yeah.
But the fascinating thing to me is that serum melatonin increased 67%.
Wow.
Right? And we know melatonin is the sleep hormone.
Right.
But your cells are actually making melatonin all day when they're exposed to infrared light.
Wow.
Right? So historically, we'd be outside again all day getting this infrared light. Obviously, it would be supporting our energy production, but we'd also be building this reservoir of melatonin all day.
Right.
and then you sleep like a baby. I mean, anybody, like the last time that you went to the beach and probably spent all day outside, you probably sleep so good. I believe that is the reason.
And does it matter when the red light session is happening? Does it need to be in the morning? Does it need to be at night before you sleep? What are you recommending right now to your consumers?
I don't know that it matters. I would usually just recommend do it just to be in line with kind of your circadian biology.
Right.
I would do it sometime when the sun is up. So
Okay.
I wouldn't do it in like 11 o'clock at night.
Okay. So you're just really trying to mimic what you would get from natural sunlight. So it's sometime in mid-afternoon, let's say.
Yeah, but the thing is, like, anytime the sun is above the horizon, you're getting exposed to infrared light. I mean,
Right.
that's why it's, again, in my opinion, we need to be talking a lot more about infrared light, because we see with the UV light, it's only specific time of the day and actually even specific
Waves.
latitudes,
Yeah.
right? So if you're in Canada right now, nobody's getting really any UV light. But the infrared light you get all day, so it's actually, like, in my opinion, more of a net deficiency. So the fact that we're not outside, we're just lacking much more.
From your perspective, what are some of the biggest misconceptions and concerns around vitamin D and how we're thinking about vitamin D deficiency?
I think the biggest is that thinking that you can take a pill. I think the biggest misconception is that you should care about vitamin D deficiency at all. You're focusing on kind of a downstream issue. The
Right.
real issue is that you're UVB light deficient.
Yep.
Because the body, we're designed to make vitamin D when our skin is exposed to UVB light. So do a blood test and you measure quote unquote low vitamin D in the blood. If you are just concluding that you need to take a pill, I would say that that's the wrong conclusion. The right conclusion, or the more kind of holistic conclusion, if you will, is that you need to be getting more sun,
Right.
particularly at midday, and get that on your skin. And that would be the ideal way to correct the downstream issue. And the other point I would make is that UVB light exposure does a lot more in the body than just make vitamin D, right? So,
Right.
Yes, you might be able to take a pill and correct that measurement on a blood test, but you're not really solving the root issue.
Right.
And these other things that UVB light does in the body, like BDNF and serotonin, and these other molecules that it interacts with or spurs the body to manufacture.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people don't know that vitamin D is a hormone as well, so it's very complex, but I think it gets to this concept that we all have, and that we have to get to the root cause. And so the root cause of these issues are really lifestyle intervention. One of the things that I find very alarming, there was a study that was done, and I went back and kind of fact checked this morning. Prisoners are guaranteed at least 2 hours a day outside, and they take it, right? I mean, of course. And our children right now, on average, there's a group of children that were surveyed, were only getting 30 minutes a day outside. So literally spending less time outside than prisoners or children. And for everything that you've just mentioned, and the lack of light exposure, the disruption of the circadian rhythm, that is a huge problem.
Yeah, it's a huge problem, and it's one of the things that I'm definitely focused on this for the next, hopefully, 50 years that I'm on the planet. I moved to Phoenix for more sun, and when my son was born, my son is a cancer survivor, so
Wow. What kind of cancer did he have?
he had rhabdomyosarcoma
When he was a
when he
baby?
was 2.
2. Wow.
It was a nightmare. I remember when he was diagnosed, his vitamin D was 18, I think.
Wow.
And I later learned that I think 85% of pediatric cancer patients are severely vitamin D deficient. Now, we don't know if being vitamin D deficient leads to cancer formation, or if cancer leads to low vitamin D, or we're still trying to figure that out. But it's an interesting thing to observe, and so it's super important to me that my son and my daughter get outside a lot. Get those kids outside. I don't want any excuse for them not to be able to go outside. Super important to me. And we live it. We're out in the morning. We're out midday on the weekends. I play pickleball or hockey with my son or soccer. We just make it a point. Like, we have to go outside for an hour during the day on the weekends, because it's so fundamental for health. And then, we also limit the screen time. There's after dinner, there's no computer for my son. I mean, he loves his video games, but it's just there's rules around that. We also do things to limit the blue light from the screens.
Yeah.
We have Iris or F. Locks. There's programs now.
Yep.
The lighting in his room is red.
Let's talk about that. I mean, practical solutions for a family. I did see actually a social media post the other day of someone's child using red light therapy, which I don't know if your kids use red light therapy yet or what your position is on that, but are there other just smart changes, swaps of light bulbs and different things for a household that everyone should be doing and can do even affordably?
Yeah, so this isn't a core product of ours, but because I was trying to solve my own problem, the evening lighting situation, even in my own house, was not great. And so we have this red light desk lamp that we sell. It's $50, but
Cool.
it's a 660 nanometer lamp. And the point is, it doesn't disrupt your circadian rhythm. It's got no blue or green light. It's very gentle. So I've got these all over my house, pretty much in every room of my house, and it's battery powered. Because I'm one of those strange people that turns off the power to the bedrooms at night.
Why? Well, I want to hear about that. It sounds like something we do in our house.
So how I got turned on to this is a good friend of mine, Brian Hoyer. He's a founder of shieldedhealing.com, so a plug for him. But after my son was diagnosed, we started learning about EMFs and if they would, potential effects, and we were just trying to make sure that we were creating as healthy an environment for him as possible. So I had Brian come, and he did a bunch of testing in our home. And one of the things is that it's really fascinating to me. Like, you lay down in bed and you can measure the voltage on your body.
Wow.
And then if you turn off the power to the room, the voltage on your body goes way down. It's
Do you
an
actually
objective
turn off
measurement.
the breaker?
I turn
at
off
night?
the breaker every
So you
night.
turn off the
For
breaker
all the
at night?
bedrooms.
And then in case of an emergency or whatever, you guys just have,
We have these.
flashlights and stuff.
Well, we have the red lights because they're battery powered.
And then you just turn on the breaker in the morning.
I do, yeah. And
Wow, that's
so
cool.
while we're sleeping at night, because essentially what's happening is there's the wiring in your walls is an electric field that comes out
Yeah.
and it collects on the body. And it's also objectively measurable. Like, you can measure the voltage on your body, turn off the breakers, like lay in bed, measure the voltage, turn off the breakers, measure it, and you see that it goes down. And it's just like, I wonder if that's probably not the best thing while you're trying to sleep, to have that voltage collecting on your body.
Do you think that the phones, and we've got phones on us and around us all day long, do you guys do anything personally? What's your perspective of how to try and control the radiation from the phones, and how do you guys think about that?
My phone is on airplane mode right now.
Okay, yeah. So
Not
that's
because so we won't be disturbed,
no,
but
that's
because
what
I
we use too.
I don't like
we
to
just put it on airplane mode and move it out of the bedroom when we're sleeping.
Yeah.
That's been our I guess the best solution we have so far. And then the blue light from the phones. I mean, let's talk about this a little bit. Have there been studies around red light therapy and light therapy and eye health? Because this is something we're right now developing a product for children, and we're including in it benefits for eye health. Because when you look at what's happening with, again, just take an average American child and the degeneration of their eyes, I was inspired by talking to my ophthalmologist about this, and it's really bad. It's really, she's seeing children that are between 5 and 10 years old that have eyes that look like 40 and 50-year-olds.
It's terrifying. And so we do a few things. So yes, there are studies of red light therapy, and I think Huberman touched on it in one of his episodes where he talked about the study of Japanese children. I think it was only a couple of minutes of exposure, and they saw reduced incidence of myopia. And so that's encouraging, but I think you need to do more than that. And our lights are powerful, so we don't really recommend they be used for eyes. We recommend wearing the eye protection, but it's multifactorial. One of the issues is obviously the blue light coming from the screens, and just this for hours and hours and over years and years can be not the best for the eyes. But it's also just, it's very unnatural to be staring at something that's 18 inches from your face for for hours and hours. We're meant to be doing what we're doing now, like looking out into the horizon.
So this is a good example. We're obviously driving in this type of truck. By the way, I think this windshield must be like one of the biggest on the road. This thing is just massive. But are you getting positive infrared light from are you getting UVB right now? What are you getting any benefit of just driving and being in a car?
In a car, you're going to be getting infrared, no UVB. It's too short, and actually it's kind of the worst of it because generally speaking, the glass will block the UVB but not the UVA.
Okay.
And the UVA is longer wavelength it gets through, and that can cause burning, so you don't even get the benefit of the vitamin D synthesis. So you really need direct
contact.
Direct light. Now in buildings, it's a little bit more complicated because now they're putting in these low E glass, it's called. And if you see, and it's in the name of energy efficiency, they're trying to keep out the mid and far infrared so that we can keep the buildings cool. But it's just, again, it's very unnatural. So if you see this green tint glass, that's typically low E glass, and that means that you're not going to get infrared.
So that's people are just making the matter worse. You're sitting in the office all day, and even if you maybe could get some light through your office window, or I'm sure they're installing these in homes, right?
Yes,
so
yeah. As a matter of fact, when I put in my patio door, I had to specifically tell the guy I didn't want the low E glass, and he just, he didn't understand why. But it's pretty much kind of standard, that's this light green tint glass.
It does seem like, in the name of quote unquote progress, right, that these things are making us better, and really they're making us worse. I mean, I think one of the examples would be like lab grown meat, right? It's like we've evolved to eat certain proteins for so long, and you turn around and you look at the labels on these foods with now what used to be one ingredient, literally one ingredient, and now there's 20 or 30, and it's somehow better for you or better for the environment. And it's just it's a total lie is really what it is. There's no better way to put it.
We've not only are we spending, and actually, so the 93% that I quote, because you mentioned the prisoners and the children comparison, that was from 20 years ago. The 93%, so that was from an EPA store.
Much
study.
higher now.
Yeah, it has to be. With the proliferation of Netflix and streaming and all of these things that pull us toward the screens, it has to be much worse.
Have you looked at any of the specific, and obviously we'll get into some of the product specific and the cosmetic, a lot of women I'm sure are using red light for their face, right? So skin health. Have you looked at any differences? Are there any differences in how men should use red light and how women should use red light? Or is it pretty much the same from what you guys are seeing?
That's an interesting question. Nobody's ever asked me that before. I don't know that there fundamentally would be much of a difference. Generally speaking, because again, all the light is really doing is supporting the cell's capacity to make energy, and supporting essentially the body doing what it knows it needs to do.
Yeah.
Really, it's supporting its healing. And so, there really shouldn't be major differences between genders. Now, there may be, like on the fertility side of things.
That's what I was getting at. I think it could be really interesting what we would find over time of fertility and hormones. Right. I think there's something there. Maybe we don't know yet, but you have to believe that the fertility crisis that we're in right now, which, you can speak to that as much as you want from your perspective. My perspective of it is that this is a collapse because of our health. I mean, you see women with things like estrogen dominance and the rise of things like polycystic ovarian syndrome, which is one of the leading causes of infertility right now, going crazy. I'm 31. We just had a child. We're in the peak of kind of childbearing years of our life, and you cannot go to a dinner party or have conversations with a group of friends without this coming up. You talk to any woman and she'll probably say something similar. I mean, it's really, really bad right now. We just developed a hormone balance product. It's now our top selling product. There's a lot of demand right now for how do I get my hormones back. And that's what I was kind of getting at, was I wonder, and you just, again, you have to believe that that's part of this infertility crisis and health crisis isn't one thing or another. It really is the way that we've mistreated our whole body.
Well, my wife and I, it took 8 months for us to conceive our son. So we went through kind of that that stress of not being able to conceive for quite a while, and certainly it definitely affected my wife.
Yeah.
And the reason why I started red light actually was primarily for testosterone. That was the reason that I initially tried it.
Interesting.
I read an article that it could help with testosterone, and I was just over 40 at the time, and I was concerned.
What did you find?
Well, there's some data, and we have some anecdotes. It's just, but hormones are tricky, right? Because it's not. I mean, it's all about balance, and they're converting into one the other. And so I think if, at the end of the day, like shining the light on that area, to the extent if the testosterone, the low testosterone is due to that area not functioning well, and you can bolster the function of that area, then yes. But if there's some other issue, whether it's plastics or some other hormone issue, then it's not really going to do much. And also, if you're normal, I don't think it's going to do much to push it higher.
Right.
We did see a few anecdotes of a couple of guys that were, in the 200 to 300 range, which is quite low, and then get to 500 or 600, which is considered normal these days. But that's a huge problem. And then on the fertility side, there was some really interesting studies. There was actually one, and we just wrote a blog article on this. There was one where it's really fascinating to me, but it was in women, and they shined the light on the back of their head.
Huh.
Like in the neck area, and they saw improvements, and it's really fascinating. Like, so what is going on there?
They saw improvements in hormone health?
Well, and fertility.
In fertility.
And
wow.
There was a higher. I'll send you the article.
Yeah, please.
But I think at the end of the day, if I were to the extent that you shine the light on as much surface area of the body as possible, you're supporting the function of the body. The body knows what to do. I mean, a lot of what we're doing in modern life is getting in our own way, with just poor lifestyle habits, and so we're just trying to correct for some of that by supplementing with some infrared light.
Yeah, that's such a good point, and it does seem like we've just way overcomplicated it, right? And we have just gotten in our own way. That's exactly what we've done. What has surprised you the most from starting this business, from everything that you've learned about maybe the benefits or the impact or the opportunity? What's inspiring to you right now with what you're doing here?
Honestly, what is I'm looking back on it, having done this now for 6 years, I'm still somewhat surprised how many people have been or just absolutely love the products, and I was even starting this, and I noticed that I was sleeping better, and I saw an opportunity in the market for something that was lower cost. But I didn't know, how many people is this really going to help, and is this really going to help people? Even though the science is there, you don't really know until you put it out there.
Right.
And so I am, even on a daily basis, just pleasantly somewhat surprised by the feedback that we get, and it's really humbling and gratifying, and the stories that we hear. And again, these are anecdotes, and we don't make medical claims, and we sell their lights, and we think that it's wise to supplement them, and all the issues that we talked about. But when my stepfather has surgery and he's got an open wound in his abdomen that doesn't heal for 2 weeks, and I remind my mother to go grab the red light that I sent a year ago and use it, and then she does, and the wound closes up. Like that is, that's what it's all about.
That was something I thought about this morning. I've been using red light, and I've actually been using it in the sauna, which I want to ask you about that, if there's a benefit, because there's definitely a marketing push around red lights and the sauna together. But question was, you really just, how do you get it to the sick, the elderly? I mean, is it an insurance thing? Is it FDA helping in some ways? I mean, what do you think are some of the next big hurdles for this category in this industry?
Well, I would say that the tech has come a long way, and there should be continual. One of the nice things about capitalism, depending on the industry, is that you get competition and you get improving technology, and so prices have dropped.
Yeah.
When I started the company, spending $1,200 on a 3-foot panel was kind of where the market was at, and now we have a 3-foot panel which will last you a long time if it's properly cared for $700, right? Yeah. So it's much more accessible, and that light, it's a lot of light. It's 3 feet, and you can do the front of your body and the back of your body, and in a reasonable amount of time.
Yeah.
And again, because the LEDs, they don't really generate much heat. To the extent that they do, we've got what I like to think of as very sophisticated heat sinks to dissipate the heat, so that LED chip will run for many, many, many years, as long as you don't put it in the sauna.
Yeah.
and you don't put it in the steam room or someplace humid.
Yes.
I mean, we have panels that have been running 8 hours a day for 6 years. And still going strong, because that's the benefit of LEDs, and that's why a lot of the indoor lighting has moved to LEDs, not only because they're super energy efficient, but also because they last forever. It's interesting, we have this database on our site, and when we started, there were about 4,500 studies on photobiomodulation. It's just a fancy word for light and biology and how light affects biology. And now there are close to 8,000 studies. So in 6 years, it's nearly doubled the amount of science and research that's been done, which is just awesome. I love that, because it's such an amazing time to be alive. I mean, we have a lot of problems, but there's a lot of really good work being done worldwide.
Absolutely.
To research these things and just to improve human knowledge. Now, the challenge is, in terms of actual clinical application of that, is, for the most part, the model in the U.S. is, you do a gold standard randomized double-blind placebo-controlled trial, and then you have to do phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and then you can get approval, and then you can actually market it and say that it does X, Y, Z. And that is just not, for anything that can't be patented, that is just not, and nobody's going to do that, because it doesn't make sense financially.
Yeah, I was just going to say, the reality for those listening, because we have the same situation, is that the investment of that is millions, sometimes tens of millions, sometimes hundreds of millions for drugs and stuff, but it's an incredible amount of money. And to Scott's point, you can't patent it, you can't protect it, it doesn't make sense. So that's why that's not going to happen.
You invest that money, and then you get the outcome, and then 10 competitors pop up and knock off exactly what you're doing. And so it just doesn't make sense economically. So to the extent that we could, this would ideally would be what the government would step in and do, is actually fund really thorough research on non-patentable things that are in the common good, right? And so that would be great to see that. Unfortunately, the way that it seems to have been working is, they just fund kind of the existing model. And,
But by the way, that's the point of the NIH. They should be funding things like this. So it will be interesting. I think that where we stand today, RFK Jr. isn't confirmed yet. I think he will be confirmed, and I think that's a really good point that he's made, to just challenge the fact that the NIH, as taxpayers, we're paying for that, should be funding gold standard studies, and to your point, things that are in the common good, that aren't new novel drugs that may or may not work for Alzheimer's, right? Which is important. But man, there's a lot of just quality science around light, exercise, and nutrition for things like Alzheimer's and dementia, right? And so it's very interesting. Obviously, the incentive structure has to shift. That's what's at the bottom of all of this. Thinking about innovation, you guys have awesome products. You have a helmet, and it's really focused on hair growth, correct? Is it also for headaches?
We actually launched, so we're spread our wings a little bit beyond red and near infrared light, so that we have a narrowband green light. So there's a very interesting study at Harvard and another one at U of A, where they use 520 nanometer narrowband green light from LEDs, and it seems to help people with migraines.
Wow.
Both in an acute intervention. So let's say you have a migraine, I would say, here, take the green light, close your eyes, shine it into your eyes, through your eyelids, and it does seem to take the edge off for a lot of people on the migraines and reduce the sensation of pain. But also, what they did is they exposed the subjects to just 2 hours of, it's like working at your desk, like having a green light. So actually, some of my employees that struggle with migraines, when I go to their desk, they have the green light on, and they're shining the light very gentle into their workspace. And so 2 hours a day was shown to reduce the incidence of migraines. Really fascinating, right? And it's really amazing, because this is a very non-natural exposure, right? It's nothing you would see in nature. It's very narrow. It can only be created by LEDs. Very narrow band green light with a peak at 520 nanometers. And so it's just doing something to the brain where it's just helping with the pain. And so we launched a product where, I mean, our business is red and near infrared light. So it's a fully functional, portable red and near infrared light device. But if you travel and if you do struggle with migraines, it's got a green light function. And so you'll have the green light available to you and you can use it, to help, hopefully help.
And so one of the other products I thought was cool, I mean, outside of obviously the panels, which is the core business model, I'm sure, but the nasal product, right? So
Yep.
for, I'm sure ENTs have looked at this and done studies, but talk about that nasal product. How does that work?
I love this product. I'm super excited for it and like the impact it can have. I didn't realize how many people struggle with allergies and sinus issues and chronic sinus infections. And obviously,
yes.
nobody wants to get cold or flu either. And so the product we launched has got red light, which is, again, boost cellular function, boost circulation locally in the nasal cavity, boost the immune system, but also blue light. And blue light is antimicrobial.
Interesting.
So we also have a mask which uses blue light, and that's to kill the bacteria that cause acne. So it's aimed at helping with acne. But blue light's antimicrobial. So if you think about it, it's a very logical 1-2 punch where you reduce the microbial load in the nose, but also boost the immune system with the red light. And I know personally, I've never liked planes. I'm from New York. I never liked the subway. And being cooped up with a bunch of people breathing in all the stuff. So I will always travel with this device now that we have it.
And
so
it's portable, so it's easy to
super
travel.
portable. It's like that big. And you just do 5 minutes, red and blue, and then switch. And so you get the benefits of the red and blue in each nostril.
That's awesome. What's next? What are some of the areas that you guys are looking at? I mean, this is which I think to your point, it's great. It's part of capitalism, highly competitive category, a lot of innovation coming out, tons of interest. What are you guys looking at that you can share right now that you think are some of the future category disruptors?
We're working on topicals. What do you want to have present in your skin when you use the red light to potentially enhance the skin benefits of the red light? So we're coming out, actually, our first product is actually a body spray.
Cool.
So, which, the idea would be, if you're using a full light, you just spray it on your body, kind of like you go to a tanning place and they use like accelerator.
Yeah.
Be like the red light therapy version of an accelerator, trying to enhance the benefits of the red and near infrared light. So
cool.
Body spray and then skin serum.
Okay. Very cool. So additions to the current product line of how to maximize the benefits.
Yes, because that's my mindset. Well, what is also complementary for our customers? And so 70% of them tell us they're buying it for skin health, skin benefits. And so if I can create a product that's going to make the red light work even better, like, that's win-win.
So skin benefits, so this gets to kind of your core demographic. Are you catering to a lot of women? Do you have a good idea of the gender split?
Surprisingly, it's about 50-50.
So a lot of men coming for skin benefits as well.
Yes, and so we do a survey, 70% for skin, 70% say they're just buying red light for general health and wellness.
Yep.
So they understand that it's just beneficial in general and, supporting the cells, et cetera, like we talked about. But obviously skin, I mean, and obviously the masks are huge and they're everywhere. And so it's much more in the zeitgeist, so people understand the skin benefits.
Yes.
Well, they've heard about it from somebody.
Yes. Is the mask your top selling product?
No.
Panels?
Tabletop panels. And I think personally, so we have a mask that uses the blue light for acne, and that's just it's kind of a safety thing. So the blue light, you don't want too much into your eyes, and so I don't want to build it into a panel. But on the mask, it's right up against your skin. There's minimal light to the eyes. But the panels in general are just much more versatile.
Right.
And you can use it. You don't just have to use it on your face. Use it on any body part.
Right.
And also, they're just much more durable. And they're much more powerful, and you get better coverage. So if you're only going to invest in one thing, I would say get a panel, and then
best bang for the buck.
Right, and it'll last you many, many years to get properly cared for.
Well, as we wrap up, what are you excited about? What are your prediction for how this next year and then future looks?
Yeah, so actually one thing I'm really excited about that I'm working hard on is the ambient lighting challenges. So part of I said it was a perfect storm. They were spending more time inside, and now we've got this low E glass, but it's also the LEDs and fluorescents that we are using are primarily blue light.
Right.
And so we're deficient, and even back when we used incandescents, at least an incandescent, it gives out full spectrum light, and there also was some infrared coming off of that incandescent. So even,
Interesting.
right, and so you were getting some exposure, even if you were indoors, you were getting some exposure to infrared light from incandescent bulbs.
And again, these bulbs were changed in the name of energy efficiency.
Yep, and the way that they're currently designed, I mean, it's really optimizing for energy efficiency and how we perceive light. So they peak at blue.
Yeah.
Typically, these LEDs that are used in ambient lighting that are quote unquote white, they have a blue LED, and then there's a blue LED with a yellow phosphor. So it's basically a yellow covering, and so the blue goes through the yellow and creates green, and it's smoothed out kind of. Usually, you use phosphorus on LEDs to kind of smooth out the spectral coverage, and so you get enough yellow and orange and even a tiny bit of red from that, where combined with the blue, the brain perceives that as white, but it's a very kind of fake white.
Interesting.
It's not really full spectrum, and it doesn't have cyan, and it has very little red, and it has zero infrared.
So, I mean, again, just for someone who's listening to this who doesn't know what that means, what are the negative implications of that?
Well, again, like our bodies, we evolved to be exposed to all parts of the spectrum all day long, essentially, except for UV, which would just be during certain parts of the day. And so now, like, we're not getting the infrared, we're not getting the red, and we know that, especially with red and near infrared, that these have certain mitochondrial benefits. So you're massively lacking. You were at least, back in the incandescents, you were at least getting a little bit.
Right.
And you were getting a little bit, but you were getting it, for hours and hours. And so now we've even stripped that out, and now we're just essentially giving the bare minimum, but only thinking about lighting and energy efficiency and not thinking about human health. And so I'm actually working really hard to solve this problem. It's actually my next big project, and I don't know, I'm really excited that I can move the needle on this and bring something to the world that actually makes a huge difference. That doesn't exist.
Does that look like, so it doesn't look like just changing out a light bulb. This looks like a whole new product.
It's designing healthy lighting that can be used in ambient lighting, but is still energy efficient, right? Because
yes.
This issue, some people, there are some scientists that they're purists, and they say we have to go back to incandescence. It's the only way we can have healthy lighting.
Right.
I don't agree with that. I think that I think the problems of LEDs can be solved with more LEDs.
Okay.
And so
just different and newer LEDs.
And just covering, trying to create what we know is healthy, and mimicking the sun,
yes,
but still having energy efficiency. That's essentially what I'm solving for, and it doesn't exist, which is curious to me that
yes,
I'm the guy trying to figure this out. But I'm very excited. We're working on getting some IP, some patents on this, because we are literally creating something that doesn't exist. But then the market potential is huge, because if you say to people, your electric bill is not going to go up, but this light is much healthier for you.
yes,
Who would say no to that?
I don't think anyone would. And I think you have a massive, as you guys already have, professional business, but a commercial business with this, as people are being asked to go back to the office, right? And they are going to be in offices, so that's
even in retail, right? Like when you sometimes you go into some of these places, and if you spend a lot of time in there, you don't feel that good.
Yeah, it's awful.
And you're like, I want to get out of here. I want to go, and then you go out in the sun, and you feel so much better immediately.
It's like grocery stores, right? I mean, you're sitting in there, and it's just like, oh my gosh, that fluorescent lighting is just awful.
Right. So if I can make the case to these places that, hey, your customers aren't going to want to run out of here after they've been in there for 30 minutes.
Yes.
I think that they'll be very receptive to that.
Healthy lighting. I like it's very easy to understand as well. I don't know if you guys have used that just phrase, but it's very easy to understand. I mean, the only other thing I would say is if you've got a good way of explaining this, because it's a question that we get asked a lot around the benefits of red light and inflammation. I think that's just a hot button right now. If you want to explain anything around that.
Yeah. Again, it comes back to really it's just your spurring your own body's natural anti-inflammatory signaling and processes. So it's a transient stressor.
Yes.
And so the body reacts and says, okay, we're under a little bit of stress here. Let's upregulate our anti-inflammatory, antioxidant pathways, and it's a net benefit. And so really, it's not the light itself is not directly having an anti-inflammatory effect. It's just spurring your body to be in more of an anti-inflammatory state and to upregulate its own anti-inflammatory processes. I mean, I think the problem with inflammation is, chronic inflammation. Inflammation in and of itself isn't a bad thing. Like it's all about balance, and there's a reason why. Any immune response is by definition an inflammatory response. The immune system has to go in and take care of business, whatever it's trying to do. You just don't want it to be chronic,
Right.
and you don't want it to be overblown.
Yes.
It's like the issue with like the cytokine storm with flus and pneumonias and COVID, is that the inflammatory response just gets pinned, to the max and doesn't, self-regulate. And that can be a really big problem. So we just want the body to kind of modulate and find balance. And the light can help the body do that.
I just really believe where we're at. I'm very optimistic. I mean, that's, and sometimes with business, I need to be more realistic, but I'm very optimistic. I think that it can't get, frankly, much worse than it is right now. And I think there's so much awesome information.
I've been trying to tell myself that COVID was the low point.
I think it was. And the years after COVID, 2021, 2022, these have been low points. What's happening right now is pretty awesome. And it's common sense. It really is. It's like we have way over-engineered this.
Very uncommon.
It's very uncommon. And we've just over-engineered the heck out of this. I mean, to your point, we're talking about, like, just stop for a minute and think about this. We're talking about human beings getting sunlight being important. Like,
I know.
how far we have fallen, right? I mean, it's we're talking about human beings ingesting chemicals and why that might be damaging. It's like, we've really fallen far. So I'm optimistic that things will change. I'm very concerned about our children's generation, because you live here, it's beautiful. We live in a beautiful area. And this image has just stuck with me. We were walking the beach trail in San Clemente. I mean, it's pretty epic. It's one of the most beautiful sceneries. And we're walking mid-morning on a weekend morning to get a coffee. My husband and I, this was about a year or so ago, and you see these families with their kids and their strollers, and the kids are just being blasted by an iPad screen. And I'm thinking, holy moly, there's a train here. There's a beautiful ocean. It's one of these just like idyllic landscapes. That's what I'm concerned about. And it's not only obviously the content and everything that they're consuming, but it's this addiction to this. And you see it even with Mark Zuckerberg. I was listening to his interview with Joe Rogan, and because I was curious on what he was saying about censorship stuff, and he mentioned how they're raising their children. And here he is, right, the leader of Meta and Instagram and obviously Facebook, and they're limiting screen time. Everyone's trying to limit screen time. So it is an interesting thing where it's kind of, the makers of some of these technologies, and I'm not calling out Mark Zuckerberg. I think he's actually really turning a corner and coming around on a lot. But it's almost this good for thee but not for me mindset. So I think some of that will change. It's being exposed, and usually after it gets exposed, there's some shift.